What's up guys, this is going to be a video on clearing chapter 16 using all the tools that the game gives you to a reasonable degree, including submarines, cats, and some equipment that takes a little bit of effort to obtain, but anyone who's at chapter 16 should have most if not all of it. The goal is just to show that you don't need all that much stuff to just clear the stage for the rewards and farm for Fujinami. What this is not is copy these exact fleets and follow everything step by step to 100% beat the stage type of guide. I'm going to be using some weaker ships that I like or just want to try out, and you should not be copying me, but rather replace all of them with better ships that you have, and I will provide some examples of what those are. In this video, I'm only going to be showing the setup, the strategies, and some important moments in a run, but not the full run. I'll leave the link to the full runs in the description. If it's not up by the time you're watching this, then just check back the next day and they should be up. I'll also link my Chapter 16 playlist with videos on the general mechanics and fleets I used to full clear this stage on Lethal. Okay, let's get into it. I made two slightly different mod fleets for 16.3 and 16.4. Nothing for 16.1 and 16.2 because they're a lot easier than 15.3 and 15.4, which you would have to beat before getting to them. Starting with the 16.3 one, I talked about the 4-ship core of Musashi, Unicorn, Aquila, and Jervis for Chapter 14 in 2022. It worked for Chapter 15.2 and now Chapter 16, so I hope everyone has access to them by now, at least the main fleet. Jervis in particular was power crept quite a long time ago by Laffy2, who is coincidentally about to rerun in a few days, and you can guarantee getting her by playing the event and exchanging for her in the shop, so no excuses. Z52 is another option, but you don't really have to use a destroyer, and I will show an example of a fleet that doesn't use a destroyer tank for 16.4. Other options include Bayard or Brest. The main fleet pretty much boils down to Musashi protecting your healers. Unicorn and Aquila have been around the longest, so I'm assuming that players are more likely to have them prepared, but Zuiho and Cowpens are equally if not more capable, especially when you're using low HP vanguards like the one I'm using here. Unicorn and Aquila are better at healing high HP ships, and work better with vanguards like Napoli, Guam, Howden Liu, and so on. Since I'm using Jervis, I thought, why not bring Janus as well? She'll be in charge of anti-submarine warfare. You can replace her with anyone else who can deal with subs, which is most destroyers, but the best ones are every single ship in my Vanguard S tier except for Plymouth. The last Vanguard is San Diego because the fleet doesn't really have a lot of anti-air, and she should be the best at supplementing the anti-air of the entire fleet. She's also pretty accessible. Jervis and Janus have decent survivability, pretty mediocre damage, good anti-sub, and subpar AA, so you should really have no trouble finding upgrades for them. Now, in terms of equipment, the first thing that probably caught your eye should be Unicorn's 2 empty slots. No, that is not some kind of secret technology that I'm about to reveal. I just went to screenshot my equipment after finishing the clear, and found out that I forgot to fully equip her. Even with no torpedo bomber, I was able to clear the stage without much issue, so you can just give her anything really, but a Wyvern, if you have one to spare, or a Brigette will be ideal. Musashi and Aquila are using pretty standard campaign stuff. If you're ready to take on Chapter 16, I don't think you need an explanation for this. Same goes for the Vanguard really. The J-Crowns are obviously J-Class specific. For other destroyers, just a repair toolkit or anything that gives more than 500 HP will be fine. In my full clear fleets, I would use way more anti-submarine equipment than just the Hedgehog and one anti-submarine plane that's on Unicorn, but that's because anti-submarine damage is also reduced when your fleet runs out of ammo. To clear the stage, you don't have to do any fights out of ammo, so this is more than enough anti-submarine equipment to get by. They probably don't have to be plus 13 either, but upgrading at least the Hedgehog to plus 13 is not a bad investment in my opinion. I left my fleet tech on because I'm too lazy to turn all of it off, but the point is you're not supposed to copy my exact fleet. Even if you have less than half of my fleet tech, you should be fine if you're using like Guam and Z52 over Jervis and Janus, and give Unicorn a complete loadout. If you want to argue with me that using Jervis and Janus and Unicorn with half a loadout with my fleet tech is better than using a bunch of rainbow ships with half the fleet tech, then I hope you have to hit pity for every single UR and your favorite ship never gets a new skin. Okay, next up is the boss fleet. The boss fights aren't that hard, so a lot of things will work. You just want something tanky in the vanguard, and a lot of anti-air so that your carriers don't get revealed. You don't need a battleship or anti-submarine at all, so I think it's ideal to put 3 carriers in the main fleet to reach air supremacy, which will help your mob fleet a lot actually. I'm using a full USS fleet just because it happens to be good, and all these ships are pretty accessible. I'm pretty sure they've all been obtainable within the past year, but maybe there's like 2 people out there who started after Yorktown 2's rerun and is already at chapter 16. And to those people, good luck. Laffy 2 and Guam come back in a few days, and only Yorktown and Guam require you to pull the gacha, but none of them are irreplaceable. You can replace Guam with San Diego if you're not using her in your mob fleet, Howden Liu, Shimanto, Z-52 Eldritch, and even ships that don't have that much AA like Plymouth and Napoli, or Bayard will be fine since the main fleet here has a lot of AA. Yorktown can be replaced with pretty much any UR carrier, and a lot of gold ones will work fine as well. Maybe give something like Centaur a try. Equipment-wise, once again, it's pretty standard defensive stuff on the Vanguard, fighters and parallel torpedo bombers on the main fleet. I have empty slots on William D. Porter and Guam for the same reason as Unicorn. I reused this boss fleet for 16-4 as well, and I gave them their missing equipment for that run. Next is the submarine fleet. I'm using old Wolfpack stuff without rainbow subtorps just to show that you don't need the best stuff. Obviously, I-404 is the best, and I prefer USS submarines for their higher oxygen capacity. But any submarine that's at least level 120 with decent equipment will do. For the carrier support fleet, I used the prototype FW190s from GearLab because I forgot to switch them off, but I recommend using flapjacks unless you really have the materials to spare for these. For 16-4, I swapped back to flapjacks. In terms of cats, I'm using 3 of the Tempesta cats that everyone can get, plus Bishomaru for the boss fleet since it's the carrier fleet. In the mob fleet, I have Every and Drake, and then the boss fleet is Teach and Bishomaru. The only cat that not everyone would be able to exactly replicate is Bishomaru, but just having decent talents on a Bishomaru will be close enough. Submarine cats are of course Steel and Edelweiss. You want good talents, but they won't make or break your clear. Okay, looking at the run, we get air supremacy with these fleets, so I'm not going to bother with the air bases because they don't do anything. The first fight is the 2-star reconnaissance node. If you have good anti-submarine and anti-air, it shouldn't give you any trouble. Even this fleet can clear it with minimal HP loss with no submarines. The next one is a 2-star battleship node. I take it on without calling submarines just to see what happens. The fleet actually loses quite a lot of HP due to both a lack of damage and healing with the ships I'm using, so I would recommend using submarines for it. You get 6 charges and only have to do 6 battles, so there's no reason not to. Next up is a 3-star battleship fleet, the only one you have to do to reach the boss in 16-3. You definitely want to call your submarines in for this one. I typically just call them after the first round of main fleet attacks to take out the enemies during the downtime of main fleet attacks. The exact time will depend on when your main fleet attacks, so don't just call them at the same time I do. After that is 2 more reconnaissance nodes. This fleet healed off the 2-star one and then lost a little bit of HP off the 3-star one. I didn't bother calling submarines because it's not really necessary, but you can if your fleet is struggling a bit more with them. After that is the boss fleet. My boss fleet is quite solid, but the 16-3 boss feels a little bit harder than the 16-4 boss, probably because the 16-4 boss is bugged. I don't call my submarines here, but the Vanguard actually ends up losing more HP than I expected. I would recommend moving your submarines and calling them as soon as the boss appears to make your life easier. I also quit out at the end of this boss fight because I want to keep 16-3 on lethal to test stuff in the future since I'll probably get 16-4 down to safe to get Fujinami. So yeah, that's pretty much 16-3. Next up is 16-4, which has harder mob fights compared to 16-3 because you have to fight 2 3-star battleship nodes, but the boss is a lot less of a threat. I'm using the same healers, but this time I gave Unicorn a torpedo bomber and a catapult. Again, Zuiho and Cowpens would work just as well if not better. Instead of Musashi, I opted for Rodney Meta, who is one of the best non-UR battleships for a campaign. Not only does she pack a ton of AoE damage, but the mini Rodneys that she summons can block or delay suicide ships as well. She is a pretty big downgrade from Musashi though, who is one of the best if not the best campaign battleship. There are a ton of other options like Raffaello, Soyuz, Bismarck's Way, Monarch, and so on. For the Vanguard, I swept out Jervis and Janus, who would have still worked, with 2 IJN ships that got unique augments relatively recently. Really, any tank and any destroyer for anti-sub will do, but these two are nice because Noshiro does quite a lot of damage and Yukikaze has a bit of main fleet protection, which will be needed without Musashi. I kept San Diego for the same purpose, there's just not much AA in the rest of the fleet. Equipment-wise, it's pretty standard stuff except for Yukikaze. Her augment gives her a barrage on torp launch, so I gave her faster torps. I have that red bag ox that gives all IJN ships 1 luck because I had a few more IJN ships that I was testing before this, but it didn't work too well, and I forgot to replace it. Even a toolkit would be better. And then I have the Shimakaze torps or Noshiro, because it doesn't really matter too much what torps you use as long as they do a lot of damage. Once again, the boss fleet is the exact same, but I filled in the missing equipment slots. The submarines are the same as before, and like I said, I changed the support fleet's fighters to flapjacks, which reduces their interception power by a little bit, but not too much. Okay, let's see how the mob fleet does from battle to battle. Right away, you would normally have to fight this node right here, so you can get to the airbase at the top. But since the airbases don't do anything with air supremacy, I'm going to engage this reconnaissance node instead. And since it's an easy 2-star recon node, the fleet doesn't really lose HP even without submarines. Next is a mandatory 3-star battleship node. This is a good time to move your submarine to cover all the remaining enemies you'll have to fight before the boss. You want to summon your submarines to quickly take out this wave of battleship enemies right here, that typically spawns after your first round of main fleet attacks. This will vary depending on your exact fleet, so pay attention to when those enemies spawn and call your submarines about 5 seconds before that. Rodney is almost dead after that one fight, but it's fine because we get a break now with the recon fleet. For this node, you want your submarines to kill this one single battleship right here, so call them in 5 seconds before it spawns. After the recon fleet, Rodney is a tiny bit healthier than before. Now, we just have to do one more 3-star battleship node. Given how much damage the first one did to Rodney, this is quite sketchy, but we get luckier this time and make it out without much of a dent. At this point, the stage is pretty much cleared. The boss is just a victory lap. Congratulations. Once again, you shouldn't copy these exact setups because odds are you have better ships. I probably have a lot more fleet tech than you, and you might not have exactly the equipment I have, but there's some important pieces like Rodney's main gun that I didn't plus 13. I'm only using slightly weaker ships to show that you don't need the best everything to beat the chapter, and I'm not recommending that you do the same. Choose whatever upgrades you have over the ships I used, and it should make up for the lack of fleet tech. You can use better cats as well if you have them, but the Tempesta ones are guaranteed and already really good. Okay, I hope you found this video helpful, and good luck on your clears. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.